listening to the Jayhawk History Podcast, your home for history, stories, stats, and memories of Kansas athletics.
They're going to go for the three, though. That's the time! Mikhailuk squares it at 72.
KU not fouling. Love fades, shoots. He misses, and Kansas will win. It's a big year for Kansas basketball. Your Jayhawks are national champions.
Ahead to Robinson. Robinson up that court. Over to Rush for a three. Swish! Oh my goodness! 38-12, Kansas.
What game are you calling?
I'm calling both games.
In the Jayhawk, cause it's out of Kansas. You know it's Spalding in my talk, I'm in my Esperanza. You know it's lemon water while we gotta fill the stands up.
Welcome to the Jayhawk History Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Oliver, and in our pilot episode, I thought we should take a look back at one of the most dominant teams Bill Self has ever assembled in his 20-plus years at the University of Kansas. This is a story of a team that exceeded expectations, fought through adversity, and finished the season as the best team in the nation, only to be met with heartbreak and disappointment in March. But it was this year they wouldn't even get a chance to play postseason basketball. This is the story of the 2019 to 2020 Kansas men's basketball team.
UCLA. This place is electric already. Wow. Am I going to hear you?
What'd you say?
Oh, wow.
On March 12th, 2020, the world stood still.
Just outside New York City, linked to the largest cluster of cases in the country.
It wasn't a question of if, but when. This is New York. We're a gateway to the world.
Days after the virus hit New York, on March 11th, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global pandemic, the first pandemic since H1N1 in 2009.
It's going to get worse and worse and worse.
It changed our lives almost immediately and all at once.
All of a sudden, I started getting these alerts.
The news of a virus outbreak rained confusion, fear, and uncertainty about in our everyday lives. This is the story of a group of young men who had their dreams taken away right in front of them. Hours before their first conference tournament matchup against the Oklahoma State Cowboys, the Jayhawks were hesitantly checking Twitter and their phones as opening conference tournament games tipped off. The sports world was in a predicament. In the outside world, countries are shutting down public operations and services. Just one day before the Big 12 tournament kicked off, the NBA was hit with the first strike of reality when the Oklahoma City Thunder vs. Utah Jazz game was canceled. Finally, later that evening, it was official. All conference tournaments would be postponed indefinitely, with the big dance in serious question of even happening. Let's rewind back to the beginning of the season to find out why this not only hurt college basketball athletes and fans everywhere, but broke the hearts and palpable national championship aspirations of Bill Self's Kansas Jayhawks, which could have been one of the best teams the Hall of Fame coach has ever fielded. It's March 2019. This is a special week each year. Usually landing the same time, students are on spring break, the weather's getting warmer, Shamrock Shakes are pumping out of Don's Steakhouses nationwide, and most importantly, college basketball is in the glory period of what we call March Madness. The Jayhawks went into the 2019 postseason following a 2018 team which not only broke UCLA's all-time conference win streak record, but made a Final Four run with unforgettable moments.
Bails him out, lost his balance. Somehow finds Bragg, 5 to shoot. Devontae Graham for 3.
Unfortunately for Self's staff, they lost key players that following summer, such as Devontae Graham, Sviatoslav Mikhailuk, and Malik Newman. But underclassmen Marcus Garrett and Udoka Azubuike, both raw but promising underclassmen, helped coach construct his next roster. Kansas would welcome 4 talented freshmen in their 2018 summer class. 5 stars Quentin Grimes and Devon Dotson, 4-star David McCormick, and 3-star Kansas City local HYAENA. Despite one of the best underclassmen rosters in the nation, Kansas was missing a reliable scoring option on offense and relied on the all-new transfer portal, which would be uncharted waters for the sport. But Coach Self wasted no time and brought in a pair of twin forwards from Memphis, Diedrich and KJ Lawson. Diedrich would be the better of the two, and the one Self would call upon when the team needed a basket most. The 2018-19 season was derailed early when starting center Udoka Azubuike was injured and deemed out for the season with a hand injury, opening up a key gap in their team. Having to adjust to a small ball rotation, Self took the redshirt off three-star Kansas City native HYAENA, who would steal fans' hearts immediately upon his first game at Allen Fieldhouse against TCU.
Agbaji for three. He's got his first triple.
As the season would wane on, it became apparent this was not a Kansas team we were used to. For the first time since 2004, Kansas would not win a share of the Big 12 regular season title. The Jayhawks were given a 4 seed in the Midwest region, which is still tied for the lowest seed Bill Self has ever been given while at Kansas. In the second round, a hungry and talented Auburn team led by Bruce Pearl would beat Kansas in what some considered the worst season Bill Self has had at KU. Following the disappointing 2019 finish, Kansas was set to return their star center Doak, coming off an injury along with a plethora of developing talent the staff had recruited from 2 years prior. The 2019 to 2020 Jayhawks, though, were riddled with storylines, both good and bad. The Jayhawks had a lot to look forward to entering the 2019 to 2020 season. Highly touted second-year player Silvio De Sousa had been battling the NCAA regarding his eligibility, won his appeal, and was cleared to play for this season. And in the preseason AP poll, Kansas was ranked third, their 7th consecutive season beginning the season ranked in the top 5. Also, it was the 201st consecutive poll the Jayhawks have been ranked in, which is the longest active streak in the nation. Entering the season, there was plenty of anticipation that this would be a Kansas team back on track in the 1 and 2 seed contention, and of course, in Big 12 title contention. But Bill Self had his eyes on a national championship. It had been over a decade since he had last hoisted that national championship trophy in San Antonio, and in the ever-changing world of college athletics, Self knew he had to adjust to remain as prevalent and as much of a powerhouse in college basketball as the Jayhawks had been. Kansas would open the season with 2 exhibition games against Fort Hays State and Pittsburgh State, which they won handily, Agbaji being the leading scorer in both of those games. The regular season, though, tipped off in Madison Square Garden. It was the number 3 Jayhawks against the number 4 Duke Blue Devils. Duke would win 68-66 in what some may call a thriller, but for the Kansas team and fans, it was more of a shit show. Kansas recorded 28 turnovers, despite only losing by 2. Here's Bill Self after the Duke loss on the turnover issues and how they would bounce back.
I think a lot of that's the nerves and you know, the environment. And guys want to do well so bad. But we'll take better care of the ball moving forward. But certainly, you know, that's inexcusable to turn the ball over.
And Coach, to follow up on that, with that many turnovers, is it still encouraging that, you know, 2-point basketball game right there?
Yeah. I guess if you're Tony Robbins, you could look at it that way.
Following that Duke loss, Kansas responded. The Jayhawks would go on to win 9 straight games, including a memorable Maui Invitational run. Kansas defeated host Chaminade in the opening round 93-63, then future Big 12 foe BYU in the semifinals 71-56, led by David McCormick's 16 points. In the championship, it would be Kansas against the number 1 player in the country, Obi Toppin, and the Dayton Flyers. The Flyers had been making noise surrounded by the freshman Toppin, and Kansas knew they would be in for a test. The game would go on to overtime, with Kansas winning 90-84, led by Devon Dotson's 31 points and Azubuike's 29. Despite Dayton shooting 48.5% from three-point range and holding Obi Toppin to just 18 points, Kansas pulled out the win and would be Maui Invitational champions for the first time since 2015. The Maui Invitational would be followed with a home game against former and future Big 12 foe, the Colorado Buffaloes, who were ranked 20th in the nation at the time. Agbaji led the team in points with 20 and 12 rebounds, as Kansas would go on to win by 14, 72-58 in front of a packed Allen Fieldhouse, as always. The middle of December saw more consistent winning from the Jayhawks as they beat Milwaukee and UMKC with ease, 95-68 and 98-57, respectively. Kansas would have a week off before the holidays. They took a trip to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania to face their first true road test at the Villanova Wildcats. It was in recent memory that Jay Wright and his Villanova Wildcats had the better hand of Bill Self, as they had defeated the Jayhawks twice in the NCAA tournament the last 3 years. The Jayhawks would lose their first road test this season, 55-56, but as usual, Bill Self would have his team bounce back with 3 more straight wins as conference play began. Following their final non-conference game at Stanford, which was a 72-56 victory, Kansas would open up Big 12 play against the number 16 West Virginia Mountaineers, continuing their insane conference opener win streak, dating back to 1960. After defeating number 16 West Virginia Mountaineers 60-53 in Allen Fieldhouse, Kansas would take a trip to Hilton Coliseum in Ames to face the Iowa State Cyclones, where Devon Dotson led the team in scoring and rebounds, the first time he had done so since November 8th that same season. KU would only have a 3-day break until they'd host the number 4 Baylor Bears at Allen Fieldhouse on January 11th, 2020. It was an afternoon game on CBS. This same day, a winter storm hit northeast Kansas, and despite the expectation and consistency that Kansas sells out games, there was question this one would be packed. For a premier matchup of this caliber, the Big 12 title potentially on the line down the road, Kansas fans still showed up, despite the conditions. However, Baylor would get the better hand, winning 67-55 and giving Kansas their first conference loss. Here's Bill Self after his rare home loss to Baylor.
The crowd was incredible, considering weather and everything, and the efforts it took by so many people just to make it where people could get to the game. Incredible. I mean, they came for a reason. They wanted to be here, and we didn't give them much to cheer about. I think when you say it like that, man, I may be wrong. It's almost saying like the players here don't care as much as players in the past because we got our ass handed to us today. That they were just better than us, and I didn't feel anything today like I did when Arizona State came in here. I felt like today that Butler, we won't guard anybody this year that's any harder to guard than him. And Mitchell obviously in the ball in his hands, and there were some great defensive possessions we had in the first half. And what does Doak block a lob to a guy with no time left? He throws in a three. They threw in 2 threes, if I'm not mistaken, as the horn was going off. But I thought our guys tried, and I hate to say this, but this is sports, and when you play a team that can win a national championship, regardless of where you play them, if they're on and you're not, they're going to beat you, and that's what happened today.
Following that Baylor loss, KU would not lose another game this season. Kansas would travel to Norman and Austin to face Oklahoma and Texas on the road, winning both games 66-52 and 66-57 respectively. It was apparent Kansas was starting to find their rotation and groove, and while their offense was not shattering any records around the country, their defense was the true storyline, holding all of their Big 12 opponents to this point, except for Baylor, under 60 points. On January 21st, Kansas would host their in-state rival K-State in an 81-60 victory for the annual Sunflower Showdown. Freshman Christian Brown led the team in scoring with 20 points. Azubuike recorded 14 rebounds, and Marcus Garrett led the team again with 5 assists. Unfortunately, the game would be remembered not by Kansas's win, but how it ended.
And a block to finish. And DeSouza blocks it, and now the bench is empty. Just unnecessary.
Yep. That's not good. This is bad.
Oh, this is bad.
This is
no good. Oh, this is terrible.
There are going to be ramifications for this going forward. I would get my team to the locker room right now. There were definitely punches thrown.
Yeah.
While the national spotlight was focused on the post-game antics, the Jayhawks were focused on one thing: winning. They would host the Tennessee Volunteers in the Big 12 SEC Challenge January 25th, just 4 days after the K-State loss, winning 74-68 and improving to 16-3 on the year. Devon Dotson led the team in scoring with 22 points and 7 assists. And just 2 days later on Big Monday, KU would play in Stillwater, winning 65-50, led by the breakout performance of freshman Christian Brown. Brown recorded 16 points and 9 rebounds on the road in Stillwater, a place that Bill Self historically has not fared well in. Kansas was now 6-1 in the league and 17-3 on the year. On February 1st, the Jayhawks played Texas Tech, the same team they had broken conference championship win streak record at less than a year prior. Despite a close contest, KU would pull out 78-75 late in the fog. It was apparent that Kansas not only had one of the best defenses in the country, but also one of the most unstoppable 1-2 punches between Devon Dotson and Doak. Between Devon Dotson's speed and Azubuike's sheer power and dominance in the paint, Kansas was becoming harder and harder to beat. In a league as competitive as the Big 12, winning 16 straight is much easier said than done, something we may not see from any team in the Big 12 for years and years to come. In the final month of the regular season, the Big 12 title race was still up for grabs. Kansas would beat Texas at home 69-58, followed by a couple road wins at TCU and at West Virginia. On February 15th, Kansas hosted Oklahoma and won 87-70 with Marcus Garrett's best performance of the year, having 24 points and 7 assists. Marcus Garrett, on top of his suffocating defense, was now leading the team in assists in almost all of their games the final month of the season. In the middle of February, Kansas was beginning to play its best basketball, only scoring in the 60s most of conference play. On February 15th and 17th, Kansas would average 89 points between victories at home against Oklahoma and Iowa State, winning both games 87-70 and 91-71 respectively. On February 22nd, Kansas was set for a rematch in Waco, Texas, against the #1 Baylor Bears, in what would go down as potentially the unofficial national championship of the 2020 season.
This is an ESPN Sonic blockbuster between Kansas and Baylor. And Garrett up top to Azubuike, who's getting some great feeds and is finishing everything for the Jayhawks. For 9, trailing by 7, and Azubuike with his 4th dunk of the game. Butler, 2 seconds. Just short, and Kansas will win it here in Waco. What a great effort by Udoka Azubuike. 23 points, a career-high 19 rebounds, 3 block shots.
From this point forward, Kansas would be ranked #1 in the country in all polls, finishing the season with wins against Oklahoma State 83-58, led again by an incredible performance from Udoka Azubuike, 19 points and 16 rebounds this time around. In the following game 2 days later, Kansas made sure that the poll voters made no mistake. Kansas would then go on the road to Manhattan and narrowly beat their rival K-State 62-58, led by Devon Dotson's 25 points. With just 2 games left in the regular season, Kansas was on its way to winning yet another Big 12 regular season title. On March 4th, Azubuike would record 31 points and 14 rebounds in a 75-66 victory against TCU. And then closing out the season on the road in Lubbock, Texas, against the Texas Tech Red Raiders, KU would squeeze out 66-62 to win the Big 12 title outright and give Bill Self his 15th conference title in the last 16 years. After the season, KU would have 2 second-team All-Americans between Devon Dotson and Udoka Azubuike. Here's what Ricky O'Donnell of SB Nation had to say about the 2 selections. Dotson took the superstar leap in his sophomore season that many were expecting. Point guard was excellent on both ends of the floor, leading the Jayhawks in scoring with 18.1 points per game, while posting a monster 3.6% steal rate. Arguably the fastest player in the country, Dotson was brilliant at creating offense for himself and others, showing a rare finishing touch and the ability to absorb contact at the basket. He finished #2 behind Luka Garza in Ken Palm's Player of the Year award race. Ricky O'Donnell from SB Nation on Udoka. This was the year Udoka Azubuike put it all together. After a torn ligament in his right hand ended his junior season after only 9 games, Azubuike returned for his senior year and became the most dominant physical force on the scariest team in the country. Azubuike was automatic inside, making 74.4% of his 2-point shots, holding still an NCAA record for field goal percentage. He took major strides as a defender and rebounder, raising his block rate to nearly 11% and posting career best rates on the glass at both ends of the floor. He also played in every game and anchored the unit that finished in the top 10 of both offensive and defensive efficiency. Doak was named the NABC Defensive Player of the Year and finished the 2020 season with the 4th most dunks in a season since 2008. That would have been 103 in 31 games, averaging about 3.2 per game. Interesting enough, just 2 years before that, in 2018, Udoka still holds the record for the most dunks in a season since 2008. Recording 122 in 36 games, equaling about 3.4 per game. Kansas would finish the 2019 to 2020 season 28-3 overall and 17-1 in Big 12 play, spending the final month of the college basketball season ranked #1 in polls. The team had also never been outside of the top 6 all year, winning their last 16 games ranked #1 in all final polls. Only losses in the season came to #4 and #16 teams in the country at the time they played. All the while having the consensus #1 toughest schedule in the nation. David Combe of CBS Sports wrote, "When conference tournaments and the NCAA tournament were canceled in 2020, the The stoppage came amid a 16-game winning streak for Kansas, which was ranked number 1 and emerging as a clear favorite to win the national championship. After finishing with 63 of the 65 first-place possible votes in the final AP Top 25 poll, Kansas could have claimed the national title. If anyone was going to raise a banner for the season, Kansas had the best case. All of a sudden, the news broke about the coronavirus outbreak, and panic ensued. The players had no choice but to sit and wait for their lifelong dream to hopefully become a reality that spring. Sadly for Kansas and the entire basketball community, that opportunity never came.
All of a sudden I started getting these alerts. Rudy Gobert tested positive.
The NBA is suspending its season indefinitely after a player tested positive.
That really sort of kicked off this global shutdown, if you will.
That was the moment when people realized this is serious, this is a pandemic.
You know, there's no guarantees in this tournament. A lot of times, you know, the favorites don't win, obviously, and so. But in 20, we had a team that was equipped to make a run. You know, we were so good defensively, and we had enough scoring. I thought that was probably as prepared a team to do well in the tournament as any we've had. And
in 2019 to 2020, the Jayhawks held opponents to 37% field goal shooting, the third best in the country, and were ranked 10th in the country in points allowed with 60.7 points per game. Devon Dotson finished the season as the Jayhawks' leading scorer with 18.1 points per game. Dotson and Marcus Garrett each averaged over 4 assists per game. And Udoka Azubuike may have had the best season of all. Doak was the leading rebounder for Kansas with 10.5 rebounds per game, also in the top 20 in the country in that category. He was a top 15 shot blocker in the country with 2.6 per game. And while playing at TCU, Doak became the 6th player ever in Big 12 history to record 20 points, 15 rebounds, and 5 blocks. That was also the game Bill Self got his 700th career win. Since 1992, there have only been 5 individual seasons which a player attempted at least 150 shots and made more than 75% of them. Azubuike has 2. Only one of the others was produced by a player from a major conference. Over his career, 58% of his field goals were dunks, and according to Synergy Sports, Doak never attempted a shot outside of 17 feet. Efficiency was the cornerstone of this Kansas team. This is the second season in which Doak led the conference in player efficiency rating, which checks out, given that he currently has the highest PER, player efficiency rating, in Big 12 history. Box Plus Minus, which attempts to measure a player's contribution to his or her team, tabs him as the 4th in conference history in the career version of its metric. Defensively, Azubuike governed the paint as one might expect. He ranked 1st in Big 12 defensive win shares and defensive box plus minus, 3rd in block percentage this season. Even the previous season, from 2018 to 19, when he appeared in only 9 games, Doak finished 3rd on the team in block shots. All of this translates to team success. The 2020 season, with Azubuike on the court, Kansas had the equivalent of a top 10 offense in effective field goal percentage at 55.2%, and on the other side of the floor, the Jayhawks had the equivalent of the best defense in the country by effective field goal percentage and defensive efficiency. David McCormick, Ochai Agbaji, and Christian Brown were each young role players behind the now departed stars Devon Dotson and Udoka Azubuike on that 2019 to 2020 team. Jalen Wilson was redshirting, and just 2 years later, Agbaji, Brown, McCormick, and Wilson would be Kansas' top 4 leading scorers. No Jayhawk fan could forget walk-ons Chris Tehan and Michael Jankovic also being a part of that 2020 team. Christian Brown, during the 2022 NCAA tournament, said on this team, quote, "We all knew we were a pretty good team that year. We were number 1 for a long time. For it to get canceled like that, kinda sucked for a while." In City, many felt this truly could have been the next team to win it all under Coach Self. Kansas finished the season ranked number 1 in all polls, as well as number 1 in KenPom, getting the 2nd highest KenPom rating under Bill Self, only trailing his 2008 championship team. The Jayhawks would go on to lead the nation in Quadrant 1 wins, went undefeated against unranked teams and only lost games to ranked teams, one each at a neutral site, home and away. The Jayhawks set a team record for a combined team GPA of 3.21. This team would also field 5 future NBA players: Devon Dotson, Udoka Azubuike, Ochai Agbaji, Marcus Garrett, Christian Brown, and Jalen Wilson. Thank you for tuning in to the Jayhawk History Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe anywhere you listen to podcasts and be sure to follow us on Twitter at Jayhawk_history. We welcome any and all future show topics from fans. So if you want to hear a story about a former Jayhawk player, coach, team, game, or anything you can imagine, let us know. We'll see you next time on the Jayhawk History Podcast.